You're listening to Design Systems Beyond the Button, where we dive into everything related to design systems for everyone from newbies to seasoned practitioners. I'm Neff, Product Marketing Manager at zeroheight, and I'm excited to use this podcast to get my burning design systems questions answered. I'm joined by my colleague Michelle Chen, a design advocate who has seen and experienced so much around design systems. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, I'm really looking forward to sharing the tips and tricks and experiences based on what I've done, but also from what I've seen other design system teams do. And there's so much not being said publicly because design systems can be so personal to a company. And we wanted to have this series to have a great way to shed insight so you can create your bestest design system ever.
I'm excited about today's topic, which we have affectionately called Who Uses a Design System? So, this one is interesting because I think that there is a parallel discussion happening around what a design system is. Is it a product and people should treat it as such, or is it company infrastructure? But I think, regardless of where you fall in that camp, it's really, really important to know who the users of a design system are so that you can figure out how to make it valuable to those folks. So I think that we all pretty much agree that designers and developers are users of a design system. Is that an okay foregone conclusion to make, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that is like the basis, right? Like those are the people in mind when design systems were made to really serve. Um, yeah, and I think maybe some people who might not understand fully what a design system is might think that design systems are for designers because the word
Mm.
design is in the name, but really the two primary groups are designers and developers and some content people, right? Depending.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting that you use this idea of primary, which I think is talked a lot about in the world of design systems. We like to delineate who are our primary users and who are our secondary users. And before we get into that, can you just like define like what makes someone a primary user and what makes them a secondary user of the design system?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, primary users would be your main audience that you're creating the design system for. So, all the parts of the design system, your coded components, your UI libraries for your design tool, the usage guidelines, documentation. Those are the people who would use it day in and day out as part of their job that they need to use it as part of succeeding in their job. So I would think that's like your primary users, the main people that the design system was created for. And then secondary set, I think, is just like almost like anyone else. Maybe there's different levels to the
Mm.
secondary set, but I think, when you have a design system, it's exposed to a lot of people. Even if it's an internal only, it's not like a public design system, but anyone can access it. So other people who might need to be informed of the design system, but maybe don't have to use it in their day to day specifically to do their work.
Yeah, totally. And I guess let's talk about primary users for a second, because I would imagine when we think about who we're building for, those are the folks that we really have in mind. So if we think about like designers and fitting the design system into their workflow, like what does a design system need to be able to do in order to be valuable to product designers?
Yeah, I so that's a really that's a really great question because I think, we all think of things one way, like, okay,
Mm.
a designer is gonna need this, but, so you're like, "Okay, coded components, sure, awesome, got this," variables and variants and got this, but I think, when it comes to what a designer needs, like, taking a step back and thinking more holistically, like, what is a designer's day-to-day job, and what are they trying to do, and how like, what are their pain points? What makes them successful? So thinking about how does the design system make them successful? And it can be pretty obvious that it's like, okay, those design components. But if you've made the design components and the variants so complicated to use, they can't find stuff, then that's not helping the product designer. So Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think we talked about this a little bit in episode one, in that it is what is included in a design system, but also like the information architecture and the accessibility and all of that that really defines whether or not it's valuable, right? Because you could have all the right stuff, but if nobody is able to find it, then it's not very valuable at all. And I would also think that this sort of plays a little bit into this debate that we've all heard about where a design system should be housed, right? Like you could have like some of this documentation within Figma and places like that, but maybe that doesn't make it super accessible. Where do you sort of sit on this debate in terms of where a design system ought to live and how that affects how accessible it might be to the people who need to use it?
Yeah, I think so. This is also maybe this is where we can put in our ad for Zero Height, because I'm a strong believer in having a documentation like home base. So
Hmm.
I won't say a single source of truth because I think that kind of comes with its own like stigmas, but it's having documentation like a Zero Height site is your home base, so people know where to go to get the most up to date, the latest and correct answer when using different tools.
Hmm.
So there if you go into Figma and find Figma files, people can find random Figma files that look alike, that look similar. The ability to search and poke through different folders and projects, like that can lead to some danger. People can use components that look like what they're supposed to look like,
Mm.
but aren't actually the right components. Um, and that's where the documentation set comes into play, where they can say, okay, to get the right library, I have to go here. It's called this. And I know this was the right library. It's not some other random thing that I found. And same thing on the engineering side, too, is that they'll know which components and component libraries that they should be using and not have to question or not have to dig around. So the idea is to really make sure your users feel confident with the information that they're finding. They're not having like a horrible experience trying to dig
Hmm.
through files and different areas for the content. So even though it might be dispersed in different places, they know that they have like a home base, like a launch pad to go to with their documentation site to find the right content that they should be using.
Totally. And you mentioned engineers, and I think that like design system practitioners are like, I am making this design system for my engineering colleagues. And then perhaps you launch the design system, and it so happens that engineers are like, why would I use this? Or adoption just isn't quite as high amongst engineers as it is amongst designers. So I guess the question here is not just should we be building for engineers, but more so how do we make our design systems attractive to our engineering colleagues?
Yeah, I that's a very common question that we get from a lot of teams is that engineers are like, "Oh, I have Storybook. I don't see
Mm,
why I would ever go to a documentation site." And again, it's yeah, you might have Storybook and that's maybe what you use day to day, but part of it's having them understand, where to find the right pieces because there could be a lot of different pieces scattered throughout the place, depending on what they're working on, and allowing them to get like a holistic view of the design system instead of just specifics. And I think the other thing is like it's a little bit of a mindset shift. Is that I think a lot of times designers and engineers, depending on your role, you think, okay, my role is if I'm a designer, I'm just supposed to design
mm,
and that's all I do. I make design decisions. I don't have a say in implementing code because I'm not a developer. And then likewise with the engineer, I code, I take what's given to me in the designs and I just do what's on the Figma
mhm,
file. Um, and really that shouldn't be the case with design systems. It's not like a linear handoff. It can be a conversation. So if an engineer is like, you know, this implementing this is a little tricky. What if we did something else and maybe this might make the user experience better or make the performance better? It's, the engineer should be raising those questions. And maybe that's when they want to refer to the design system documentation
mhm.
site to see what the usage guidelines are, to see what other components might be out there that they can use to provide a better experience. So I think it's like I would love to see teams having more of a conversation around design and implementation instead of just kind of like following what's been told. Cause like we are subject matter experts within our field, but at the same time, like we need to be like looking at the holistic experience. So thinking about, okay, maybe as an engineer, like I see that we're using this different pattern, but maybe we can use the same pattern or similar pattern from different flows from before. Calling those out and just double checking that, right? Having the conversation. And it's not to say that, it's not for the engineering team to critique the design team necessarily, right? Like it's really a collaboration of like, hey, we're all trying to strive for a great user experience. How can we do that together? So I think that's a big thing is like part of it's that mind shift set where you're getting the engineer to kind of think more outside of like just taking orders, right? And they don't want to just
Mm.
take orders. They want to contribute to something meaningful. So empowering them to be able to contribute to something meaningful by using the documentation site.
Yeah, totally. And I think this also is a throwback to episode 1 where we also talked about how design systems give you this opportunity to do one thing that has this like super large impact. So when you're talking about engineers saying, "Hey, let's make a change in this particular pattern," that pattern might be used 10, 15, 20 times throughout the product. So they get this opportunity to have this input and then that input be replicated and create a user experience on a much grander scale, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing is like this helps your work scale, not
Hmm.
just for the product, but like as your own portfolio piece too. I think, designing flows and designing patterns and having that used ubiquitously and as a showcase piece to say, hey, look, we made this product way easier to use for our users. That's pretty rad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really, really helpful incentive for engineers to contribute to the design system. But I think even when we think of them as just consumers to the design system, and I want to say just because being a consumer of the design system is also like pretty rad and amazing and important. But that also helps to scale engineering work. And I think sometimes you talk to engineers who are saying, hey, like, I want to have more information about why design decisions have been made. And I want to have confidence that we've made the right design decisions and that this handoff has all of my questions answered. And I think when we have really good design systems, then we get to tell engineers who are consumers, hey, we've thought about all of that so that you can code as efficiently as possible and we can get our products to market a lot faster. And even that, I think, is really, really helpful for engineers. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the other thing is there's so many design decisions or just decisions in general. So not
Mm.
even just design, but like technical implications too. That and Dan Mall mentioned this in a webinar a couple months ago, where you're documenting kind of like journaling, you're documenting patterns and decisions made in your documentation site. So if you're building a dashboard, you document some of the decisions. Like we decided not to go with, this size for this reason,
Mm.
or we're going to go with max 3 columns in a dashboard for this reason. And having that context is super helpful because you might have that context as an individual, but I might have that. If I don't document it, when Neff you're trying to build a dashboard, you're going to be like, why is it like this? And you might not, and you might, maybe you're like, let me just push the envelope and make it 4 columns when there was a reason why we stuck to 3 columns. So sharing that information is like it's super beneficial because that way everyone has that context. No one's having to like keep that in their brains. Like you can
Mhm.
just let that go, like have space to learn other things. Yeah, that historical knowledge is really great to like get down on paper, so to speak. So you don't have to keep remembering it. It doesn't get lost. People have that context and you can all move forward and do cooler things or use, your extra brain cells for really cool innovations. I think that's like hugely, hugely helpful.
It solves the lottery problem. I think a lot of companies like to say, what would happen if you got hit by a bus? And I had a manager who was like, listen, we're not going to be negative. We're going to turn that on its face. And it's like, what happens if you like hit the lottery and you win billions? And of course, you're not going to work here anymore after you've like won billions. So, how do we make sure that everything that you know is somewhere so that when you're off on a private island or doing whatever it is that you do with your lottery winnings, the company can continue to move forward and sort of have all of that historical knowledge.
Yeah, I think I love that analogy better than the bus factor. Uh, the lottery. I like the lottery factor. Yeah, it's just people come and go, and
Hmm.
I think especially in this economy, people are expendable, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, so, it having that knowledge is helpful, for your teammates, and even if you're leaving on good terms, right? Because you've won the lottery, you don't want to strand your teammates while you're in a hammock in an island drinking out of a coconut.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, I think, a position that I don't think gets enough love, and that is content designers who are also primary users of the design system. Can you tell me a little bit about how content designers are serving both as consumers of the design system and then also contributing to the design system? What value are they getting out of it?
Yeah, so in terms of, consuming content, they're looking at components and seeing, like, where content and copy can be written, but also,
Hmm.
if you have a large team and you have several people writing UI, copy, then or you have editors, they can read and say like, "Okay, I understand, like, how, uh, things should be phrased for this type of error message or this situation or this pattern." And then on the flip side, they are also, providing content patterns. So this is not something that's super, prevalent in design systems today, but I think is slowly becoming a trend,
Hmm.
is, adding content patterns. So disclosing like in patterns, or like, if you have like a modal or something, you're explaining like what kind of content goes where, how to phrase it, especially with error messages, like how to
Hmm.
phrase messages. Maybe you have like a written structure, a sentence structure, and they can contribute that. So that way, if you are a designer and you're not a strong writer, or you're not into writing, like you have a structure to go with that's pretty consistent. Um, so that's how they can also contribute. That's not a super it's like a super needed, like, piece of design systems, but not a very prevalent one, and I know there's, like, a small, like, group of content designers that work on design systems that are trying to, um, like, gather momentum with the movement. But, yeah, it's a struggle. So, yeah, I think they secret it's a secret society that they meet and they talk, but they're trying to get bigger traction. Um, and by the way, whoever submitted the question, I tried to mark the question and then it like, "Oh, okay, it's back." Just kidding. Never mind.
We have it. We have the
Good,
question. Um,
good. Stop
but
panicking.
we are with content designers. We're a part of that movement. And I think like one of the things that was explained to me that made me like instantly understand the value of content designers was talking to ADT. And for folks who are maybe outside of the US and not aware of the behemoth that is ADT, they do home security systems and they have things like a phone app and hardware that exists in your home and all sorts of things. And the way that they explained it to me is like, imagine you get an alert on your phone that's like, red alert, somebody is breaking into your house, right? Like, they want the language that is in that message to be consistent between what people are seeing on the app, what they're seeing on their hardware devices, and anywhere else, so that in this moment of sheer panic, people understand exactly what to do and how to engage. So we might think of it as like, oh, who cares? It's just a couple of words somewhere, but like it matters quite a bit in terms of user experience. And I think helping users understand what behavior we actually want to encourage in specific moments.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I didn't think about, like, the urgency behind, right? So, like, yeah, when you have a problem, like someone breaking in your house or a fire or something, you're, like, not thinking straight. So, like, every message you need to be able to understand the messages. And maybe we're not all working in urgent moments like that, but I think the clearer the message, the easier it is for everyone, right? Like lower cognitive load and stuff. So yeah, maybe people who are listening, if you're new to design systems, starting up, refreshing wherever you are, like 2024, adding content to your design system documentation, definitely let us know if you do that.
Yeah,
Because we'd love
massive.
more examples for sure.
Exactly. Massive shout out to content designers. You're the best. As you mentioned, we do have a question here that's about designers and developers. I'll go with that one. So, what factors should be taken into account by design systems teams when they're planning and implementing adoption from the perspective of both designers and developers?
Yeah, that's a common challenge that people have, so I'm happy to address that. I think part of it is, like, the biggest thing that I think people don't realize when they're working on design systems, because we're not necessarily, like, I don't know, we're just so focused on getting the pieces built so people can use them,
Mm,
that we forget that there is sort of a behavior shift in getting people to use the design system. So they've been coding, however, for the longest time in their own way. It's worked well. And now we're introducing something new to them. And change kind of freaks everyone out.
mhm,
Even if it's for the better, it's like, oh my gosh, like I have to like learn a new way to like pull in some stuff. And yeah, it does take time, but we all know the reward is well worth it in the end. But getting over that hump, I think it's just like changing, like, starting a workout routine. The hardest part is starting. Once you're in it, like you're in it. Except for me. But that's a different story. um, so it's really like thinking about, managing that change, right? Like understanding
mhm,
that people are going to be a little hesitant. So there's different ways you can ease into it. So um you can try doing a pilot. So maybe you have like one engineering team try out the library, or one design team, or one design team, or a couple designers working on a couple, like one or two projects or products, try using the UI libraries, UI kits, and getting their feedback. They might say, "Hey, this is really hard to use," and maybe that's where you have to implement some improvements. Um, but then, see if it goes really well. They get, really into it. They can be your spokespeople to
mhm.
share, "Hey, I've been using this. This is really great. It's cut down on my work." And that gets people excited about it. So, other teams are going to want to try it. And you don't have to like, flip a switch and say everyone must use it now, like, but have a plan as to like how you're going to incrementally roll this out. I think that also sits well with people to know that this is a gradual change. So like, maybe a couple engineering teams here and there will start to use it, and then maybe in 2 sprints from now, other teams will use it, that type of stuff. Or, starting with this quarter, that, everyone's going to be using it. So really thinking about staggering the rollout. I think the other thing is getting people really excited about the design system and the documentation and all the bits and pieces. So getting them ready, like bringing them in, as you're getting stuff ready to launch, you can start having meetings, start sharing. I would It's easier to go where the people are rather than create. So when I say that, it's not to create your own event and invite people to attend, but rather go to existing engineering, like team meetings or organization meetings, and invite yourself. Chances are engineering managers super happy to have you. They just won't think to ask you to come. So definitely say, hey, can I talk about the design system that we're rolling out in the next month or so, or what have you, and share that information there just to get people interested in it. Um, and sharing as much as possible. Like, it's nice to share along the way, like your progress. So if you're like, hey, we're just starting this, or hey, we're halfway there, or expect to see this in a couple months, like that way people won't get caught off guard. Like, no one likes surprises these days. No one likes change. So like the more you can like ease people into things, like the better, is what I like to advise design system teams. And especially like understanding that you're helping them navigate that change. And really, showing them that this is how they can be successful in their day to day. Because I think a lot of times, like, if you think about it, like, especially if you're a big company, it's like, here's a new process, but like, it's not
Mhm.
really to the benefit of, or it might not feel like to the benefit of the employee. It's just like, oh, this company is pushing down this new process or this new tool or whatever. And you don't want to be that. Like the design system is way cooler than that. So you want to be like, hey, like we're here to help you succeed. Like we're not trying to add friction to your
Mhm.
life. We want you to succeed and do awesome stuff. So great question.
I feel like that problem specifically is something that affects all design system practitioners, but probably is a lot more prominent amongst design systems teams that are like centralized, right? Because you don't want to be seen as like this evil design system team that's like apart from like regular product work and is coming in and imposing all of these things without real consideration for how the product org is working and those workflows. I'll just add really quickly Outdoorsy, who was one of the finalists for the Design Systems Awards this year, had these folks who they called Bonfire stokers, who that's like such an amazing name. But the idea was like product designers and engineers who were on legitimate product teams who were evangelists for the design system and were going in and in their own stand-ups and in their own meetings kind of like raising their hand and being like, hey, we can use the design system for this, and helping to create that cultural change from somebody who was on the team versus this centralized design system team that might be seen as sort of like outsiders, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Like, that's super cool. I like want a t-shirt that says like I'm a bonfire stoker.
I do
Um,
too. We got one more question in the chat that I want to make sure that we get answered as well. So, is it advisable to implement a design system that includes both a master library and staging libraries, which are created using the master library for various PODs of products when dealing with an extensive product? And I guess maybe the question there is like, does that affect adoption at all, or like how people view it? What do you think?
yeah, I think that can be tricky. So, I think so this is like typical designer answer. It depends. So, oh, this way. I'm like so confused with okay, this way. It depends. Um, I think the thing is this can get really confusing for your teams. So, often because we get this question a lot with like, "Oh, I'm making components and branching in Figma. How do I reflect that in my documentation?" And I always usually say, like, your documentation is kinda like your final, like, this is what's the latest
Mm,
and so you wanna kind of get all that brainstorming and branching out of the way and decided upon before you add it to the system. And that means having conversations outside of your documentation. I think some people want to document that process as well, and it's not always necessary. Like, you don't wanna over document, especially if it's not going anywhere. So, typically what I'd recommend is that like your main design system is like the final thing.
mm,
It's not in any like, staging type of like preliminary or like interim phase that's not final, because otherwise things get a little confusing. I think if you have a separate project that's being like a little bit more experimental, you can have a section of your design system or area like figuring out how you want to architect it, and have that set aside. That's not going to confuse people, so people know, okay, this is the experimental beta component area for this beta product or this like, conceptual product. That's where, you might have to separate your components a little bit more or create some more like clear separation just so you're not confusing everyone. So I think the end is like think about making sure it's very clear for everyone who is involved and not involved. Um, Even though it might not be the most efficient way within like the tool set that you have, because we don't want to like confuse people because that could just end up in more chaos and more rework. And I think if people get confused and they get frustrated, then they're going to be like, I'm not going to use the design system. I've learned to just do my own thing, right? So that's something that you want to avoid. So at depending on your situation, think about the users and making sure that they have clarity.
totally. And I think The other question that we have in chat is potentially one that you might also say it depends too. But I do think that it kind of comes down to how much information do we provide in a design system, and is providing that information ultimately giving us more clarity or less clarity? So the question is it preferable for a design system team to act as a bottleneck, reviewing and incorporating new components before feature rollout? Or should they conduct audits after the launch and then integrate the components into the design system?
Yes, this is another it depends, and it strongly depends. I think, because there's pros and cons to both, right? Like, you wait for the design system team to make the component to share it with uh, the rest of your org, but then that slows them down. But at the end, you won't have to do the rework,
Mhm.
or, you have to get the feature out, and you have to create a component that's not part of the design system, and then you'll have to, like, go back and refactor it with, so, like, the design system team can then make the component, refactor it, and put it into the product, so there is some rework, and it really so I don't wanna say it depends, but, like, it depends on, like, what your team and your PM is comfortable with, and also how your team is set up. So maybe I know when I worked at, my previous company, we didn't have dedicated engineers on the design system team, or they were partially dedicated, so they couldn't create everything, and then they opened it up so other people could contribute components, so if another engineer from a feature team needed to code a component for their flow or feature, they would do that and then submit it to the, um, coded library. So that can help as well. Um, but it should, like, you have to weigh kind of like what's most important. So it could just be getting the features out, um, and I think and how much resourcing you have, because maybe you have the resourcing, but maybe you don't. And then just making sure everyone's okay with the answer that the team has kind of decided. Because it's, 6 one way, half a dozen another. It might not make sense to do one thing or to wait, the differing priorities, I think, is just, at the end of the day, coming to an understanding, okay, we've decided this and we're okay that it's gonna mean refactoring, or it's okay because this is gonna be better for us in the long run if we wait. Um, or they can get creative and you know what, we'll just have a bunch of engineers make all these components really quickly and then go from there, right? And we're done. Um, so yeah, it can really depend on how your team is structured and what resources you have, but at the end of the day, agreeing on what people are okay with is probably what's most important.
Yeah, 100%. Because I suppose there's a trade-off either way, right? And I guess being super clear about the trade-off that you're making and why helps everybody get on board, and have confidence in the design system team in terms of like, oh, this might seem weird to me, but I understand exactly why they've done it. I think it's like also the same as like the columns example. It's like I might want to do 4 columns, but I understand why we've limited it to 3, because that documentation exists and because I can now understand the reasoning. So we've spent a decent amount of time talking about the primary users of the design system, and that makes sense. We should talk about them. But there are also these secondary users of the design system. Who are those folks?
Yeah, so, like I mentioned, it's like everyone else who's not the primary user, and to be more specific, that could be like your PMs, your leadership, other stakeholders, like maybe your design managers, your design directors, product owners, other teams. So if you are a big company and maybe the design systems for like your web apps and their mobile apps or different product, maybe they're looking at your design system. Marketing teams as well as brand teams, they can all be viewers and maybe slash consumers, or curious about your design system to because it can affect what they do as well. Or they might have input for your design system as well. So especially if they're on the brand team, maybe they're doing a brand refresh with different colors, or they're tweaking the colors. Like, they're gonna have some input as to what happens with how that's reflected in the product. So they might have some input, but maybe in terms of another uh, product that's similar, they might want to use some of your patterns for reference to help align the entire company product portfolio.
Mhm.
So lots of different people. I think the biggest thing is like you don't know who's going to use it. Like it could
Mhm.
be anyone, and it could be scary, but it also can be good. Um, you have no real control over that, and it's kind of interesting because like I've seen where a marketing team had a design system for their website and for like the marketing website, so their
Mhm.
.com sales site, and then a product engineer found it and was starting to use it, and they kept asking the design team, like the product design team,
Mhm.
how come we're not doing buttons like this? And we're like, what are you talking about? And they were like, oh, I found this design system documentation site. So it's kind of weird. Like I was just like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to use that, but I could see why you think you might want to use
Mhm.
that, you know? And so just yeah, just think about other people possibly using your design system for good, usually for good.
Let's hope they're not using it for evil. But I suppose once you find out that somebody's using the design system, do you then, as a practitioner, start to think about making the design system more palatable for their use case? Or is it like I'm putting out what I'm putting out for primary users and that's it? And if you find it, you can use what's there, but I'm not building for you.
Yeah, I think, you don't want to, because the secondary user base could be like thousands of people versus maybe your hundreds of primary users.
Hmm.
You might think that, oh, I need to think about them as well, and which you do, but I don't think you should cater to them because they're not your primary users. But you should just make it very clear how they can use your design system or who the audience is. So they're not confused. So, like that engineer, the product engineer who went to the marketing design system site, um, and we had asked the marketing design system to put like some clarification, like
Hmm.
this design system is only for the marketing site, not for product. And if you need product, you go to this site.
Mm.
So making it very clear of like what the site is for, who are the primary users and how else that they could use it. Cause we had to say like, so we on the product design system site, that was really really crazy. Um, so so for our site, we had to say, "Hey, this is not for marketing. This is not for brand. This is just for product. There are differences that are specific for product." So maybe some of it might be like colors were tweaked a little bit for accessibility
Mm.
because of how they render digitally versus like if you printed the colors for accessibility. So those details. So we kind of just really made it very clear. You're still going to have people who might start taking stuff from your product, but at least you're trying to cover your bases and being very clear as to what people can use the design system for. Um, and then I think keeping having a way for them to communicate with you is also super important because
Mm.
they might have a real reason to reach out to you, be like, hey, can we consolidate patterns or align on patterns? Or I'd like my, like, I'm an engineering manager and we need to start consuming a design system that's in React and we're using Angular. Can we start to consume your design system? So your user base might grow. So just be mindful that having like an open channel for them to reach out to you.
That is such a good tip. Do you have any ideas about where that open communication could live, and how you get people to start engaging with it and asking questions and all that jazz?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. Like I think um, like I said, go where the people are. So if you
Mhm.
have Microsoft Teams or Slack, you can create a channel that people can reach out to you very easily. Think about what's best for your team too in terms of monitoring, because maybe email is the best way to get in touch with your team, but maybe it isn't. So maybe, Slack or Teams is a great way. And then, just having on your documentation site, like, hey, here's how you get in touch with us, um, is another great way. Sometimes people might have a form on their site to like submit like
Mhm.
a comment or a question. Um, but yeah, going and then also having those like bonfire stokers, like your advocates, like even if you like listed them, hey, like if you have questions, reach out to these people. Because they'll
Hmm.
know to like direct uh the people coming to them to the design system team. And even maybe like and the other engineering team or other design team isn't ready to talk to the design system team yet, but maybe they know one of those bonfire stokers that can be like, hey, how's this work?
Hmm.
And they can kind of address some of the questions and be like, you know what, like, why don't you talk to the design system team? I can introduce you. Right. So just being available and open is really great. I think that's the thing is like, it's all about who in your company and that organizational agility to be able to like put people together, right? Like, um,
Yeah, for sure. And I think like maybe there's also some element of making yourself present as a design system practitioner. So if somebody is having a conversation sort of out in the open about things that the design system might be able to answer, sort of like gently being like, hey, like we're hanging out over here in this channel if you want to ask this question here. And by the way, here's a link to our design system site where you might be able to get some clarity about this particular question. And I think if you do that often enough and you are visible enough, then you're almost like training your colleagues in a really nice way, in terms of like where to look and who to ask and how to engage so that they find the right answers to these questions. And I think you like alluded to this before, but like human nature is that we are going to find an answer to a question. We, as
yeah.
design system practitioners, are like, we want them to find the right answer to that question. And how do we make that possible?
Yeah, so true. I think that's the thing is like, as an introvert myself, like if I can avoid talking to somebody, I will. So that means I'll scroll around different like files and folders so I can find my own answer. It might not be the right answer, but it like got me out of talking to somebody. Um, so think about that and think about like how introverted other people can be, where they're just not going to talk to anybody. And you don't want it to be like that. So if they have a place to go, they can squirrel around and find the documentation site and not have to squirrel around too much and then find the right answer. Like that's a huge win. Um, but yeah, I think the other thing is like, I think it's great if you're like being very visible and very vocal. Um, like you can definitely like help with that encouragement of having them, reach out to you and talk to you. At the same time, like then they might get too comfortable with that too, and they just like reach out to you for everything. Be like, hey, can I use this button here? What about
Hmm.
here? And how about here? So even though you know the answer to that, and you might be super happy to answer that, that's also what the design system documentation is for. And you want them to use the documentation so that way you're not constantly getting pinged about questions that they can kind of find the answer to on their own. So I think there's definitely a good balance, right? Like, and that's also, it's great that they're starting to talk to you, but then you can kind of just gently go, hey, like, all your answers are here. And if the answer
Hmm.
isn't there, then that's just an indicator that you need to update that. And if you have like a really easy documentation tool. You can quickly go in and edit that as you're talking to them. So,
Yeah. Totally. And I think like the other value in that, and I think this is exactly what you're getting at, is like even if the answer is there or so you believe, if that person goes to where you're directing them and they're like, "Hey, I'm still confused," then you're like, "Okay, I need to update it." Or if that answer doesn't exist, I need to create new documentation, whatever it is. But like if you're constantly like answering these one-off questions, then it's pretty impossible to know whether the documentation is actually effective or if it's not, because everybody is just relying on that one-to-one communication.
yeah, yeah. For sure. And I think that maybe that's a good indicator, right? Like if they're not going to the documentation, maybe your documentation isn't complete. But maybe it is and maybe they just need to use it, right? So it's definitely good to get a pulse check on that for sure.
Totally. And as we close things out, I have one more question for you, which I think is maybe the most important question ever. So, if you are a design system practitioner, you're launching it, we've been talking for almost 50 minutes now about different things that you can do and all of that. But what is the most important thing that folks can keep in mind? If it's only one thing that they get out of this entire podcast, what is it?
Yeah, this is a lot of pressure. Like, start off with like, this is the most important question ever. Um, so little me here trying to answer the most important question ever. I think the biggest thing that you need to keep in mind is the user experience, right? So
Mhm.
we are always thinking about the user experience as as developers, as designers for the end users of our product, which is great. But also, your people using the design system are users too. They want a good
Mhm.
user experience. They don't want just because it's an internal product, they don't want a bad user experience. They want to be successful. So they want something that's going to be easy to use, whatever that means for, you and your team, or they and their team and their organization. Um, if it's not usable, they're not going to use it. Just like how we are when we consume other apps. If it's too hard to use, we abandon it and we go somewhere else, or we don't use it and we, continue about our way. So think about what the user experience is and make sure that it's, really helping them succeed, right? It's not adding friction. It's not keeping them up at night. It's not causing frustration, that they really enjoy. And it's bringing out the best of them to contribute to the work that you all do. How
Totally.
is that?
I think it works. It comes full circle to how we sort of started the episode in terms of like thinking about who is consuming your documentation and what's best for them. Make it accessible, make it easy to use, create this really amazing user experience. I like it. Um, Thank you so much for joining our second episode of Beyond the Button. Next month on December 14th, we'll be live again with another episode where we're going to be talking about how to launch your design system so that it is successful. Join us live, or we'll also be on all your major podcast platforms. See you soon.